Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Peaceful Discipline workshop. I'm just going to wait about 2 minutes, but I'm going to get going pretty quick. So if you can hear me, let me know in the chat where you're calling in from. Where are you tonight? You'll see who's the furthest away. We're going to do things a little bit differently tonight. We're going to get this all done in 1 hour. So I don't want to wait too long before we get started. And then there is a bit of a lag in when you put something in the chat and when I can see it. So let's see. I'm going to, oh, hello from Sydney, Australia. You're the first. Hi, Melissa. You win so far. Sydney, Australia is pretty far away. It must be the morning there, I wonder. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, also pretty far. Hey, Susan. Okay. All right, we are doing this tonight. I'm just going to get going. New Rochelle, New York, O'Fallon, Illinois. Great. All right, thank you for coming. Let's just get going here. So I'm going to just dive in. We're doing things a little bit differently. I'm doing this on my own tonight. Corey wasn't available to help me out, which is fine. I think I can handle it. But what that means is that I'm going to check the chat after we're done. So if you have a question, it's probably better to wait until, maybe you could jot it down and just wait until the end when we're going to be doing questions so that I don't have to search for your question. So we're going to have time for questions, but I just want to encourage you to just wait until we're doing that to ask your question. So maybe just jot it down so you don't forget. All right, we're going to dive in. Let's see. Okay, here we are. We are going to be talking about how to raise great kids without yelling, threats, or punishment, or consequences. So I just want to give you a sense of where we're going. Stay with me till the end. We are going to get this done and dusted in 1 hour. I know you are all busy, and I appreciate your time. We're going to talk about the limits workshop. We're going to get all of the great content. Then I'm going to tell you about parenting course that starts next week that I would love for you all to join. Then I've got a little download gift for you, and then we're going to do the live Q&A. So we are going to be just diving in here. Let's see. We are here. Why does it say no? We're going to talk about peaceful discipline. So by the end of our time together, you're not only going to know why we don't want to use consequences, but what to do instead, which is the big part, right? There's a bit of a lag when I press the button. So maybe you've been out in the grocery store and your kid's having a meltdown, or you're at the park and your kid is hitting you, and maybe some, well-meaning stranger or even someone that you know has said, what your kid really needs is discipline, right? And what a lot of people believe, and I know you don't because you're here, is that kids need consequences to learn. Or maybe you're here because you want to learn about this idea, right? And a lot of people actually think that it's a good idea for kids to be afraid of their parents, and that, that there's this idea that kids should respect their parents, but what that often means is that they're afraid of their parents, right? And that's not what true respect is, but a lot of people see those as the same thing. This is the thing, though, that I want you to ask yourself. Even if you could control your child through fear and consequences, does it even work? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. How far would you go? What would you do? How miserable would you make your child's life? And how would that feel? I know for me, it feels terrible. That if I lose my patience and even yell, even when I don't mean to, it still feels terrible. What are the long-term effects of using consequences and fear to get your kid to cooperate? And, this is one that I think about a lot. And what is obedient something that you really want your adult child to have as a trait? Sure, obedience is a really attractive thing for a 4-year-old. When you think about it, it would be really easy to have an obedient 4-year-old or 6-year-old or whatever. But is obedient really one of those traits that you want your child to possess when they grow up? I know not for me. I want my kids to be independent thinkers, and I want them to be, I want them to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because they're afraid of what's going to happen if they don't. You're here because you want to discipline with love, not fear. But what does that look like? That's what we're going to be talking about. So who am I to be telling you this? I'm telling you this as a coach. I've worked with thousands of parents through my courses, memberships, one-on-one private coaching. my Facebook groups, reached people, so many people through my podcast. And I know that this works professionally. I've seen it work over and over again. And as a parent, I know this works. My kids are kind, considerate, thoughtful, hardworking, and they've never been punished once in their life, ever. So I know this works to raise kids into great adults. So just a brief overview in case you're new to peaceful parenting. Peaceful parenting has 3 big ideas. Those are regulating our own emotions. That's the first big idea, and we always start there. We're not going to be talking about that tonight. That's a really important part of peaceful parenting. It's always the place to start. It doesn't mean that you don't get upset. What it means is that you are committed to trying to calm yourself if you do get upset, right? You know how to calm yourself if you do get upset, or you try to. It's a focus on connection and our relationship with our child. We're going to be talking about that a little bit. And it's kind, firm limits with lots of empathy and no punishment. This is a graphic that I put together that sort of shows the moving parts as I see them of peaceful parenting. Self-regulation, what I just mentioned, that is our foundation. Connection, that relationship, is the trunk or the thing that holds everything else up. And around the tree, we have, we need to learn how to cultivate empathy. We have to welcome feelings. We have to cultivate self-compassion. We have to build cooperation with our kids. We're going to be talking about that a little bit, but mostly we're going to be talking about setting limits. These are sort of like all the moving parts of peaceful parenting. One thing I want you to think about before we even go on is a peaceful parenting mindset shift that you really need. I have never seen anyone be successful with peaceful parenting if they don't believe this with their heart, that kids want to be good. So I want to ask you to take this step with me into the mindset shift that kids are doing the best they can. The reason I know this, and in fact, we're all doing the best we can, doesn't mean that we don't try to be better if we're having a hard time. But what that means is that because we are, as humans, we are hardwired for connection. That is literally how we survive, is by being connected with our caregiver. Because if no one cared about us, they would leave us on a rock when the fires came. But because our caregivers care about us, we are born to develop that connection with them so that we'll survive. So if we're acting out of alignment, or our child is acting out of alignment with that behavior that builds connection, it's because there's something else going on. They're low on resources, immature brain. We always say they're having a hard time. They're not giving me a hard time. Kids really do want to be good. They want to please us. And I'm not saying that they're never provocative, and that they don't do things on purpose sometimes, but that's often because they don't know how to get their needs met, right? So we want to remember that kids are doing the best they can, and that bad behavior, as Stuart Shanker says, wonderful podcast episode if you haven't got it, bad behavior is stressed behavior. So we want to remember this mindset shift when we're learning about peaceful parenting, when we're doing peaceful parenting. All right, so let's dive into the content here. A definition here, consequences, just so we're all on the same page. A consequence or a punishment, and they've come to be synonymous in our culture. I think people shy away from the word punishment because it sounds so harsh, right? You're going to get a punishment if you don't do this, or if you don't stop doing this other thing. So consequences has come to mean sort of punishment light, but really they're interchangeable. So a consequence is something you do to a child, or you threaten to do to a child, to either teach them something or change their behavior. So I'm going to be using both words interchangeably. They really do mean the same thing, but I just want to differentiate for a minute here between consequences and natural consequences. So I hear people sometimes a little bit confused about the difference between consequences, natural consequences, and limits. So I want to make sure that you leave here really knowing what the difference is between those 3 things. Like I said, a consequence is something you do to a child to inflict some sort of threat of making them feel bad, or actually making them feel bad to try to get them to change their behavior. A natural consequence happens with no involvement from us. So if you, go out in the rain without a raincoat or an umbrella, you get wet. That's the natural consequence. If you forget your lunch, you're hungry. That's the natural consequence. If you find yourself thinking, what should the natural consequence for this be? You're probably either talking about a punishment or a consequence, or you're talking about a limit. So anything that we do is going to be either a consequence, which I don't want us to do, or a limit, which we do need to do in order to, move through our day smoothly and help kids know that they're safe. But if a natural consequence is something that happens with no involvement from us. So natural consequences can be really, really great. They can be such a powerful learning tool. So for example, your 3-year-old wants to hold the helium balloon and doesn't want you to tie it on their stroller or tie it on their wrist. And then the thing that you knew was going to happen happens, and they accidentally let go of the string and the helium balloon flies away. So they've learned either I need to really hold on to it, or I need to let my caregiver tie it on my stroller next time. That's a learning tool, right? That natural consequence happened, which was that their helium balloon is gone. One thing we really need to watch out for with natural consequences is that we have to be careful not to pile on. So we have to be careful not to say, well, that wouldn't have happened if you let me tie it on, your stroller. And the exception to this is if you really think the child doesn't understand what happened. If you really think there's an information gap, of course you're going to tell them, but you're still going to come alongside them with kindness and empathy, and like you're on the same team. So you say something like, oh my goodness, your helium balloon flew away. I'm so sorry. Oh, this is so sad. And then they're free to experience the regret. If you pile on and say something like, well, you should have let me tie it on your stroller, then they can aim their regret at you and be upset with you instead of feeling that natural consequence learning lesson. So we just have to be really careful. Sometimes parents do pile on unintentionally because they want to make sure the kid learns the lesson of the natural consequence. It's most of the time, I would say that's not necessary. The child is aware of the natural consequence. So we want to think about, I'm going to give you 4 of my top reasons why we don't want to use punishment in peaceful parenting. There are so many, but we don't have time in this hour to go through all of them. So one of the first reasons why I think we can we don't have to use consequences is because what the research shows is that they don't work. They may work in the short term to change behavior, but there was a study that I read about with 2-year-olds and timeouts, and so timeout is considered a punishment. It's that's different from a time in, which is something that I teach, is a time in versus a timeout. But a timeout is like you go sit in that chair by yourself for 3 minutes because you're 3 years old or whatever. But toddlers who were given timeouts were worse behaved in a year than toddlers who were not given timeouts. There's a whole book called Punished. There's Punished by Rewards, and then there's also Unconditional Parenting, which by Alfie Kohn, which really goes into the research about punishments and rewards. And the research just shows that they don't work to change behavior for the long term. And you may get, we're going to get into that in a second. So punishment doesn't work, even if you felt okay about it. It doesn't work to raise kids who do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, or do the right thing in the long term. Another reason why I don't want us to use punishment is because it doesn't address the root of the problem. So say you have a sibling that's hitting their other sibling, and I would argue that punishment, it may or may not get them to stop. As I said, it doesn't work. But even if you could get your child to stop hitting by threatening to remove their iPad privileges or whatever, no TV today if you hit your brother, it doesn't address why are they hitting their brother? Do they need some more help learning some self-regulation skills? Is there sibling rivalry that's going on that you need to address? Is there, do you need to stay closer by and have more supervision so that things don't get out of hand? But just saying that you're going to, you lose your privileges if you don't stop hitting, it doesn't address what's going on that was causing the hitting, right? And that's one of the reasons why they thought that the toddlers that were given timeouts, their behavior wasn't better. It was actually worse in a year, because the timeout doesn't address the root of the problem or the root of the misbehavior, and the kids didn't learn. Also, another problem with punishment is it teaches our child what's in it for me. So let's say, you said you were going to give the kid a timeout or take away their iPad privileges if they hit their brother. Well, what they've just learned is I shouldn't hit my brother because it's bad for me, or I don't want to hit my brother because I don't want something bad to happen to me. So that is actually not teaching the child what we want to teach them, which is I shouldn't hit my brother because it hurts my brother, and I want to be kind and I don't want to hurt people. So punishment really doesn't teach our child the right thing in terms of like their community or property, it teaches them that not to do the wrong thing because they don't want anything bad to happen to them. So I hope you can see where like there's like a gap in the morality and like character building in terms of, we want to teach kids the right thing to do because of the effects that the right thing or the wrong thing has on the world around them or the people close to them, not because of what's going to happen to them, right? And because the long-term effect of that is, well, what if I'm not going to get caught? Then I'm going to do the thing, right? So if you really want a kid who's going to do the right thing when no one's looking, punishment is not going to get you there. We also want to think my final reason here, and I think this is one of the most important ones, is that punishment hurts our relationship with our child. And as you know, from what I just said about the peaceful parenting, big idea of the relationship and connection being one of our really big ideas. Connection is, not only what makes life sweeter with our kids, but connection is really the way that we influence our kids. There's a great, that's the next slide. My oldest son, that's him actually about, I want to say 4 years ago now, and he graduated from high school. And when he was in high school, he said to me, "Mom, you don't understand. So many of my friends don't call their parents and tell them where they're going. They ignore their calls or texts, or they don't go home at night." And he said, "You're really lucky that I care what you and Dad think," which really stuck with me. That it's true. Like he cared, and our other kids too care what we think. And that has made, 90% of all of the issues that come up generally with teenagers just gone because we have a family team and our kids actually care what we think. There's a really wonderful quote from one of the sort of grandfathers of this kind of parenting. And when your kids are little, you can use power, right? With punishment. You can use power and just picking them up and moving them where they want to go. You can leverage things over them so that they will do what you want to do when they're little. You can't do that anymore when they get older. So what he says is either because they're too big or because they just do what they want to anyways, right? The inevitable result of consistently using power to control your kids when they're young is that you never learn how to influence. So I just want us to really remember that. That's really inspiring to me. So let's talk about what we want to do instead. A lot of people know that they don't want to use yelling. They don't want to use threats. They don't want to use punishments. They don't want to use timeouts, all of those things. But if you just drop out that set of tools, you can't move through the day because your kids are not going to just listen to you just because you're not yelling at them. You need a new set of tools. That's what we're talking about tonight. And that's actually what I go over in my course that I'm going to tell you about at the end of this workshop. We go over, it's 10 modules. We go over all of the different points of peaceful parenting, sort of like just all of the tools that you need if you do want to go away from that old school parenting towards peaceful parenting. So let's talk about limits. Limits are what we do instead of using consequences or yelling or threats. So a limit, a limit is what we want to bring in when we have a gap between our expectations and our reality. So if you have, I don't know if you can see me here. Well, if you on the left side here of this crevasse, we've got the expectations, right? And on the right side, we have the reality. So you might have the expectation for what your child should be doing or what you want them to stop doing. And then you have the reality of what's actually happening. And when there's a gap in between our expectations for our child and the reality of what's happening, that's where the danger comes in. And the danger that is, we get frustrated. We want to pull out the threats. We want to pull out the yelling. And what we want to do instead in peaceful parenting, conventional parenting uses yelling, consequences, threats to close that gap, right? To bring the reality to the expectations. Peaceful parenting, we use limits instead. So a limit is something that we put in place to help our child meet our expectations. So it's how do I get them to do X, Y, Z, or how do I get them to stop doing A, B, C? That is a limit. So let's just dive in here and talk about limits. So a limit is that, I like to think of it as support or scaffolding. What do you need to do when a child is not meeting your expectation? Instead of yelling, instead of threatening, instead of bribing, what do you need to do to help your child meet that expectation? So a limit can be either physical or emotional. And I talk about scaffolding. Sorry, the scaffolding can be physical or emotional. I talk about scaffolding. Scaffolding is a term that educators often use. It's the support that you give a student while they're learning a new skill. So the scaffolding that we're giving our kids is the support that we give them while they're either learning a new skill or they are becoming mature enough to meet our expectations, or is just until they've internalized the expectations. So that scaffolding can be emotional or it can be physical. So let's look at some examples. So what we want, okay, so say you have a kid who is not getting dressed. First we want to look at, is the limit necessary? This is a question that we always ask ourselves when we're setting a limit. Very first of all, am I regulated? Remember I said we always start with self-regulation. So if we're in a frustrating situation, we want to stop, drop, and breathe, regulate ourselves, because I could tell you all the strategies in the world, but if you're not regulated, then it's going to be really hard. So we regulate ourselves and then ask ourselves, is this limit necessary? I personally went for, health and safety limits. Obviously, there are limits with the schedule, time limits, all of those kinds of things. So sometimes there are limits that are really necessary. So let's say two different scenarios on the same, or two different variations on the same scenario. Say your kid's in their pajamas and you want them to get dressed to go to school. Well, is the limit necessary that they have to put their clothes on? Maybe not. Maybe they can go to school with no clothes or with their pajamas on. Maybe they can wear their pajamas to school. So you might say, do you want to wear your pajamas to school? And they say, yes. Okay, situation solved. But maybe they're naked. They can't go to school naked. So maybe the limit is necessary there, that they get dressed, right? So okay, yes, we do need our child to get dressed. So the next question is, maybe is the limit that we're expecting reasonable and developmentally appropriate? Maybe we're expecting them to get dressed by themselves. Maybe it's not developmentally appropriate, or maybe one day they can do it and another day they can't. This picture, this kiddo has a baby sibling. And so maybe, they've regressed a little bit and you're always helping the baby and doing everything for the baby. So maybe they just really need some help, right? So we want to ask ourselves, is this a developmentally appropriate expectation? Is it a reasonable expectation? Is it a necessary expectation? So let's say we've gotten to yes with all those things. The next question we ask ourselves is, what do I need to do to help my child meet my expectation? Expectation, again, remember, is to get dressed. What do I need to do? So in my course, I have an entire module on getting cooperation. And some of the strategies that we talk about, I'll just give you a few examples. Maybe more connection. Maybe your child could get dressed by themselves, but they, need you to say, you can't get dressed. Maybe you're out of kisses. Maybe I need to give you 1,000 hugs and kisses, and then you'll be able to get dressed. Or maybe you need to help them. Maybe you need to play, make it fun and play a game. Maybe you need to pretend they're a baby and get them dressed. Maybe you need to have a race. Maybe, they're trying to think of, pretend their clothes have magic powers. Ask them to say, I bet you can't surprise me with what you're going to wear, and challenge them to get dressed and see if you can guess their outfit they're going to wear. There are lots and lots of different ideas, but the main point here is that your child, that gap between expectations that they get dressed and the reality that they're not, we need to do something. That's the limit that we're setting in this case, is we need to, the scaffolding they're providing for the limit, we need to do something to help our child meet that expectation. So let's look at another example. And I am using kind of young examples. I have had, none of these change with the age of your child, in terms of what our philosophy is, or what our approach is. But of course, things will change depending on the situation. So I have had people taking my course that have older kids, younger kids. It's all, it's all applicable to all ages. I developed the course for 2 to 12. So let's look at another example. We've got kids who are playing with the hose, and one sibling asks his sister to stop squirting him, but she doesn't stop squirting him. So the expectation in this case is, you want the sibling to stop squirting the other sibling with the hose, right? So is it necessary? Yes, because the other child is unhappy about being squirted when he doesn't want to be squirted. Is it reasonable? Absolutely, it's reasonable. It's a reasonable expectation. Is it developmentally appropriate? Well, the question here is, what kind of support does your child need? Because you ask them, hey, I heard your brother telling you he doesn't want you to squirt him. Can you please stop? And then the child doesn't stop. So this is a limit that we need to bring to help protect the bodily autonomy of the child who doesn't want to be squirted. The girl with the hose is not listening. So the next question is, what do we need to do to help the child meet the expectation that she stops squirting her brother? Well, we could get playful. Maybe we ask. The thing with peaceful parenting, we never want to ask more than once, right? So we ask once, child's not listening, then we know, instead of asking and asking and asking and asking, or asking and asking and then yelling, we want to step in after that first time, right? And what do we need to do? So what do I need to do to help my child meet my expectation? And by the way, peaceful parenting is a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but it's also really makes the work that you're doing on the front end when your kids are younger, it makes the teenage years so much easier. You may, you're either, I've heard it said that work with parenting is either going to be an inverted triangle like this, like not much work in the early years and tons of work on the later years, or it's going to be like this, like a lot of work in the early years and less work in the later years. You're going to put in the work at some point. The question is when. And I also would imagine that I think probably some people feel exhausted at just me talking about getting playful with all these things, but I imagine that you put a lot of energy into struggling with your child and hassling with your child and fighting with your child to get them to do things. So you might as well put in the energy for good rather than evil, I like to say, and building connection at the same time. So anytime you're inviting your child to cooperate by using play, you're also building connection, right? And I said before that the scaffolding can be emotional. So that also means sometimes it just means empathy, right? It can be like, I know you really, really don't want to get dressed. At the same time, we do need to get going because I need to get you to school and you need to get to work. So sometimes the scaffolding can be empathy. And when kids feel understood, they're often a lot more willing to be cooperative. So let's go back to our hose scenario right now. So what you need to do, you ask once, this little girl's not listening. I would say, you can't squirt your brother, but you can water the flowers, or you can see how wet you can make the side of the house if she's allowed to do that, or whatever. I would try to, to redirect her and squirting something else, or you can come and squirt my feet, or, whatever it is, or you can fill up this bucket. And if that doesn't work, we might have to put the hose away. And so we are doing that because we need to do something to help the child meet the expectation. The expectation in this case is that she's not going to squirt her brother. If she can't stop squirting her brother, either on her own or with our help, we're going to have to, with our help by redirecting or getting playful, we're going to have to help her by putting the hose away. You know what? It looks like you are having such a hard time remembering not to squirt your brother. We're going to turn off the water for right now. I've had people ask me in this workshop before, well, what if she then promises to stop after you've turned it off? I'd say, okay, you can have one more chance, but this is going to be the last chance. I'm a big believer in second chances, but I wouldn't give more than one chance. So what we might have to do is turn off the water. And often in this workshop, people then ask me, well, isn't that a punishment if she's, they want to play with the hose and then you turn it off? What we want to think about is that sometimes we can do the same thing and it feels like it can feel like a punishment, or it can be a limit. And this is how you tell the difference. So you want to look at your tone. Are you kind and empathetic? Oh my goodness, you are having such a hard time remembering to not squirt your brother, right? You're regulated. You can't do this without being regulated. So if you're not regulated, no matter the words you say, if you're dysregulated, your tone will not be kind or empathetic. And what's your intent? Are you angry that your child's not listening to you and so you're turning off the hose to make her feel bad? Or are you just trying to support the expectation, which is that she does not squirt her brother with the hose? So anytime you're not sure, there may be times you do have to take something away. Like maybe your kid is, using a toy truck too roughly in the house, and you have to take the truck away because no matter, you've asked them to be, watch out for the floor or the coffee table or whatever. You may have to say, let's put the truck away for a little while. It seems like it's just hard for you to remember to be gentle with it. So sometimes you do have to take things away. Sometimes you do have to remove children from situations. Maybe they're at a birthday party and they're just, their behavior is not acceptable for a birthday party. You might have to leave, or, you're out for dinner or something like that. You might have to get your food wrapped up and go. Just have to get a little drink of water. Sometimes these things do happen. But we always want to look at, if we don't want it, it will feel like a punishment if we're not regulated, right? If we're angry, even if we say neutral words. So we want to regulate ourselves. Again, we're coming back to that self-regulation. And we want to use a kind and empathetic tone, and we want to do what we need to do to support the limit, not because we're trying to make them feel bad or afraid, right? So we might say, hey, listen, if you can't calm down, we're going to have to leave the party. Can I help you? Do you want a hug? Do you want to take a break? Right? They still can't do it. You know what? I think we need to go. It's just too hard for you to listen to the rules of the guests or the house where we're guests. So we're always just thinking of, what do we need to do to support the expectation? There are times when your child is going to feel bad about a limit that you've set. They might feel upset that we've turned the hose off, feel upset that we've had to, leave the party or whatever. It's okay if they're upset about a limit that we've set. It really is. There are going to be times when our children are unhappy about things. We want to remind them that we're on their team, lots of empathy. I'm so sorry. You really wish we could have stayed. You know what? I bet next time it'll work out better. Let's go home. We'll read a story, blah, 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 whatever it is. So a lot of people ask me, but how will they learn? Don't I need to do something else so that they remember not to squirt their brother with the hose next time? No, you don't need to do something else, because the limit is the lesson, right? Children do not need to be made to feel bad in order to learn. This is super important. Do you need to feel bad to learn something? Like if you made a mistake at work and your boss, called you out in front of everyone in the office, yelled at you, made you stay late, and deducted part of your pay, would you learn a lesson better than if your boss took you aside and said, hey, that was really bad that we missed the deadline on the Johnson report or whatever it was. What's going on? Like, how can I support you? Whatever. Like, internally, you already feel bad about missing the deadline, right? You don't need anyone to make you feel bad to make you learn next time to plan your time better or whatever it was that made you miss the deadline. So I really want you to remember this mindset shift, that feeling bad does not make children learn better. In fact, when kids feel bad, they often act worse. And also, if we punish kids, say you punish that kid for squirting her brother after you've said that, after he's asked her to stop, she's going to turn her resentment and anger towards you and resentment towards her brother, rather than thinking, next time I want to keep playing with the hose, so I'm not going to do that again. Or I also want to, listen to my brother, or whatever it is. But whenever we punish, that gets the anger misdirected. So as I just said, the limit is the lesson. That's what, when we set limits with kids, when we provide scaffolding for them to choose to cooperate, like for example, the getting dressed thing, when we provide scaffolding for them for that, they are internalizing the limit, right? They're learning inside, gee, I'm not going to squirt my brother, or part of our routine is that we get dressed, because they're choosing to cooperate in that case. And they're starting to internalize the limit. This is what we do in our family. So you can see in these examples how this is all coming together, right? I've mentioned that when things are tough, we have to self-regulate, right? We often will rely on connection, or, that cultivating empathy. In the example of, maybe the kid doesn't want to get dressed because they don't want to go to school. We are going to empathize with them. I know you wish you could stay here. Or the empathy with the kid who, the hose gets turned off. Oftentimes when we empathize, that's if somebody's upset, empathy actually is the only thing that really makes anyone want to calm down, is if they're feeling understood, right? And that leads into that welcoming feelings. At what I said, it's okay if your child's upset about a limit that you've set. And we have to be really good at welcoming feelings, because that teaches kids that feelings are not an emergency. Self-compassion. You've got a new baby and you've got to get your, preschooler dressed and out the door, and it's hard, and you're doing it on your own, or, it's the 10th fight of the day with the kids with the hose. And sometimes raising kids is hard. And I have never seen anyone be able to do this work without being kind to themselves, even when they mess up, because you will mess up. there will be times when you don't stay calm. And there will be times when things are hard, no matter if you're doing all the right things or not. So self-compassion is just such an important part of keeping calm in the moment. Anybody would be having a hard time in this situation is something that we tell ourselves when things are tough. And B, in making progress when we're not perfect. Self-compassion is such a big part of that journey. Setting limits, we've talked about a lot. Building cooperation, we talked about too. So these are sort of some of those moving parts and pieces. And they are what we teach inside of the course. So I'm going to quickly tell you about the course, and then we're going to go into a Q&A. So this is the thing. If you want to be able to do all of these, looking at these examples that I gave, if you want to be able to stay calm and set limits, and also get that relationship with your kids, it's going to carry you through the teen years. This is the course that I really recommend that you take. You can spend a ton of time Googling, reading books, listening to podcasts, but the thing is, you're going to not know what sources to trust and get conflicting ideas. B, how much time do you have to spend doing all of the research and looking at all this yourself, and not knowing, well, should I have done this? Should I have done that? The beautiful thing about my course is it's a roadmap. I was talking to some potential clients the other day who are going to start working with me, and they said they've been trying everything with their daughter who's 8. And the dad said, we just need a roadmap. Like, we just need someone to say, like, this is what you do in this situation. This is the kind of response that is going to make the outcome better, etc. So the roadmap is something that I put together. It's everything I teach my private clients, and like quite literally everything you need to know about peaceful parenting is in there. I said that older parents with older kids have taken it. One of my students wrote to me afterwards. She actually wrote a lot longer than this. And I'll tell you where to find the rest. But she said, the course wasn't just helpful, it changed our lives. And I hear that from so many people. One of my clients who's a dentist said that the course didn't make her just a better parent, but it made her a better dentist. So it's a module, it's 10 modules that you sign in online. And I'm going to tell you where you can go to find out more about every module, but this is just sort of an example of what the course looks like. They're short video lessons. They're also available in audio and transcript, depending on what your jam is. And I've made them all bite-sized so that you can really, you don't have to set aside, an hour at a time to be successful at this course. You can do it a little bit every day and still get, or a little bit every couple of days or whatever. And you can fit it into your busy schedule. I know how busy you all are because I talk to you every day. The other great thing about the course is that you get weekly group coaching with me. I'd say it's almost always me unless I'm like sick or on vacation. We have drop-in office hours where you get to ask questions. And this is a $600 value based on group coaching costs. You get me every week during the 12 weeks of the course to ask your questions and really get extra support if you're feeling stuck, or if you want to meet other parents too. One thing that some parents have said is that they couldn't believe how great the office hours coaching was, that they weren't expecting that would be the best part of the course, was the office hours. Another parent, Colleen on the left, said that she knows she can make it through the week because she's got the hour to look forward to ask me questions and get support. I just want you to know that this is, I have such a good relationship with our kids. They're now 22, 19, and 16. We're all going away for almost 2 weeks together a week from today. And our 22-year-old and 19-year-old are actually taking time off work to go on a family vacation with us. And I don't know, I guess it's not as surprising, my 16-year-old is, but they don't live at home anymore and they want to be with us. So I just really, it's not because I'm a special unicorn or they are, it's because we raise them with peaceful parenting. And it really is literally just the tools and the approach. And I really want you to be able to have this, to be able to enjoy your kids and enjoy parenting. This is how much the course costs. I'm going to give you a website. We're almost done with this, then we'll have time for Q&A afterwards. There is option one which is the course and the office hours by itself, which is $497 US, or 3 payments of $180. Or there's option 2, which is the course plus the office hours plus private coaching with me, 6 1-hour calls. This is the cost of only to do private coaching with me, so that means you get the course for free. So we also, I want you to know that there is a money back guarantee. And I have launched this, let's see, I've been offering this course for 2.5 years. And I've not once, I mean, maybe this will be you, but I've not once had anyone ask me for the money back. Not once. In all of the times that I've offered this course, it's available, and I will cheerfully give you back your money if you do the course and you don't like it or it's not working for you. That's how much I believe in this course and stand behind it. If you, yeah, I've already said this, because you want to have kids who listen to you and want to spend time with you, and you don't have to wait until the teen years. It's really, things happen while you're doing it, right? So this is one of my clients, Nina, she's in Sweden, or a course participant rather, and she said that her, that it changed her life. There is a fast action bonus for the first 5 people who join tonight, and you get 3 months of my membership for free after the course is over. So that's 6 months of weekly support, and you will be able to make such great changes and really make things feel better in your family. That's 3 months of the Peaceful Parenting membership. It's $47 a month. So that's 100. Did I do the math right? It's almost $50 a month. Yeah. Oh, it's $141. Sorry, $141 value. So if you're one of the first 5 people who joins and that tonight, you get that for free. Okay. Let's see. Just again, I wanted to remind you of the money back guarantee. And that's in the first 30 days. We start on Wednesday this week. Doors close on Tuesday night. The next time I'm going to offer this is probably February of 2024. But like, why wait to make things easier? You can go at your own pace. We have 2 weeks during the course where there are catch-up and implementation weeks. You have lifetime access to the course, and you can spend more time on some modules or less, and less on other times, depending on what you need. And I know it's time. I know it's money. I know it's hard work. And I also know that this course changes people's lives. So if you want to look for it, it's sararosensweet.com/parenting course. There's the information of where to sign up. There's a lot more on the course. There's a link to the entire course outline. There's stories from other parents who took the course. And then there's the frequently asked questions, along with the schedule for the office hours, are all on this page, sararosensweet.com/parenting course. So for those of you who have stuck with me for this long, I'm going to try and, let's see, I'm going to put this in the chat. I've got a little free downloadable cheat sheet for you. The link, I've just put it in the chat. If you would like to get that, you can download this cheat sheet and print it out. It's sort of like just a nice summary of what we've talked about tonight. Let's move into questions. I'm going to stop my screen share, and I'm exactly on time. I was hoping we'd have at least 15 minutes for questions. So let's do it. If you have a question, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Stop the presentation. If you have a question, I would love for you to pop it in the chat. And again, I said there's about a 10-second delay from when I see your questions to when you leave them. So questions are welcome about anything I've said, about the course, about your particular situation. We've got 17 minutes left, and I will answer as many questions as I can in that 17 minutes. Okay, Melissa says, similar to your party example, my son often doesn't want to leave after school care as he's having too much fun riding his scooter. He's tired, a bit wild. He escalates when tired. Melissa, how old is he? Well, I keep reading. He escalates when tired and generally is dysregulated after a long and tiring day. If I try, it's time to go home, let's put your scooter away and you can ride it again in the morning, I often get a no, and then he'll ride off. I've tried and I take it the scooter is something that belongs to the aftercare. I've tried connecting. He's 5. I've tried connecting, watching him for a bit and getting playful, but that doesn't work. So without physically tackling him on the scooter, what would you do to try to move through this peacefully? So what I would do, it's funny, this just came up in office hours in my membership, this exact question for a kid who didn't want to leave day camp. I would try having something for him to look forward to in the car or on your walk home. So I would, let's see, I'm just trying to think of what the situation, so he's on the scooter. There are 2 things that I would try. I would try scooping him up and spinning him around in a playful way on the scooter, like trying to pick him up and hopefully he'll let go of the scooter, and you can spin him around in a playful way to just kind of regather him and get his attention. And then I would either have a surprise for him that you have in the car, and it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be like, I have a surprise for you, and then it's his favorite little stuffy that is waiting for him in his car seat. Or in the morning, you could have him choose something that he wants to be in the car for when he gets in the car. Or it can be a song that he wants to, it's his scooter, you bring it from home. So can he ride it? I'm wondering if he can ride it to the car, or if you can ride it at your house. And if that might help too, to like bring the scootering away with you. And the other thing that I was going to say, so try getting something for him to look forward to, a surprise or something he's brought. The other thing is, when we're talking about limits, it could be that if you try all of this and it's still not working, he might not be able to have his scooter at after school care, which would be really sad. But if he's, if you talk to him about it ahead of time and you say, look, it's really not working for me to have a fight with you and have to tackle you down to get your scooter, we might not be able to bring the scooter anymore, honey. And remember how we talked about the tone and intent makes it a punishment or a limit? If it's really not working and you've tried everything, it might be that the scooter can't go with him to aftercare. The other thing that I was going to say is maybe get the cooperation of the teachers that he puts it away before you get there. I don't know. I hope that helps, Melissa. Yeah. So, okay, Lee asked a question. How does this explain for neurodivergent children? So, and tacking on to that is Justine, who says, I secondly questions. I have kids who get ABA therapy. They don't use punishments, but often rewards, which I don't love because it creates the expectations of rewards for every good behavior. But sometimes it seems necessary to get a behavior established. So I don't know that much about ABA therapy. I'm glad to hear they don't use punishments, because I have heard that can be really, the ABA therapy can be hard on. It sounds like your kid's autistic. This is what I say about kids who are neurodivergent. Peaceful parenting is always where we want to start. And sometimes when you have kids who are not typical, you need more support and you need more strategies. But it's never that you need different strategies than peaceful parenting. There are things in peaceful parenting that are going to apply to everybody, including the parts about self-regulation, including the parts about figuring out what the limits are. There are ways that, building cooperation works for all kids, even who are neurodivergent, right? Connection might look different for neurodivergent kids. You might need to use, strategies that are, that you might need to work harder at the strategies for kids who have attention problems, say if the neurodivergence is ADHD. And, I don't know what to say about the rewards and the ABA specialist thing. Like, I know rewards are not in line with peaceful parenting. We really, unless it's something that's short term and time limited, like, giving a kid an M&M to use the potty until they're toilet trained, we generally don't do rewards, because exactly what you said is that, what did you do when you need a kid to do something and they want a reward for everything? But I also don't want to say, like, I know enough to say throw everything you're doing out the window. But it's possible that through learning these new strategies of peaceful parenting, you'll be able to do it without rewards, because you'll learn some new skills and you'll learn some new context for getting kids to cooperate, and you won't need to use the rewards anymore. Or maybe it can be something that's just used by the specialist. Or maybe the reward could be, maybe you can shift the reward so it's not like a thing, but it's like time spent with you, or a fun game. Like, as soon as we do this thing, we're going to play a game together. I hope that helps. But really, with neurodivergent kids, it's not that these things are not what we go to. It's that sometimes it's not quite enough, and we do need other strategies in addition. But I've had tons and tons of parents who have neurodivergent kids go through this course. I myself have 2 kids with ADHD. So I know that this stuff does work with neurodivergent kids. I have clients who have autistic kids who use peaceful parenting. I have people who've gone through the course whose kids are autistic. In fact, that woman, Wanda, who I showed that she said it changed our lives, she wrote to me after this course was over, like a year later, said that she had a neighbor who had a non-speaking autistic teenage child, and she had been teaching their parents peaceful parenting and using the strategies with this autistic child that is her neighbor, and has seen like great changes for them. Okay, let's see. Nikki says, oh yeah, we've already talked about that. So Stephanie says, 9-year-old, your example of morning routine and lack of cooperation, but when told we need to get moving, he says he doesn't care. We're stuck. He's 2E. So, you know, it's possible that he needs more scaffolding. I mean, I don't know what, this is the kind of thing, it's a little hard to answer in these short things, but we would look at, you know, and this is something we could do in office hours. We would look at, what's your routine? How much time is there? What kinds of, you know, scaffolding are you currently giving him? Does he need more scaffolding? A kid who says they don't care, I wouldn't say this is in 100% of the cases, but often I say, well, that sounds like you need more connection if he doesn't care. If he's 9 and he's saying he doesn't care about what? He doesn't care about you. Has there been conflict? Is your relationship fraught? Are you in the habit of fighting? We always want to start with building. So we start with this directions. And I would say if you're currently using punishments, don't stop using punishments right away. Work on the other things that we start working on through the course. Do what you're doing while you're working on self-regulation, while you're working on building connection. Well, it's really hard to stop using punishments when you're not good at regulating yourself and when your connection isn't great. And I want to be clear, when I say connection, I don't mean love. I know you love your children. I know they love you. I'm talking about mutual respect, understanding, caring what the other person thinks. And if that is frayed or there's been a lot of power struggles and conflict, start there. So I know, Stephanie, I just wonder, you know, with just a little bit of information you've given me, if starting with working on connection would be helpful. And then there's also like, you know, how can you get him involved in figuring out the routine? What kinds of things, you know, is there some reason why it's complicated. Is there a reason why he doesn't want to leave, that where he's going that he doesn't like? I'm not sure. Does anybody else have another question? Let's see. Oh, I thought there was any or questions about the course. Well, y'all are quiet. I usually get, I guess there's, you know, it's funny. I had 300 people sign up for this and there are only 17 of you left on the call. So I know a lot of people are waiting for the replay. I know it's really hard to get on things live, and this time of 8 o'clock didn't work for a lot of people. It's hard to find a time that works for everyone. But really, if there are any other questions, I'm so happy to answer them. I'm going to wait a few seconds. Okay. So Melissa says it does help the good. I hope so. She says, I tried the surprise in the car before, but then I feel like he expects it every day and is becoming a little entitled and always expects surprises and presents. So if it's something small, like a toy of his from home that just surprised him in his car seat, I really wouldn't worry about that. I'm not saying you go to the dollar store every day and get him some new thing. And also I wouldn't worry about 5-year-olds becoming entitled. He is there at 5. Egocentrism and self-importance is totally normal, right? It's totally normal. You've got a lot of time for him to learn that he has a really great life and that the world doesn't revolve around him. And it's really okay to like make these things win-win. That's one thing we really think about with, I can't believe I actually didn't say the words win-win yet, but with limits and expectations, we often think about how can we do win-win? So he doesn't want to leave daycare. You are his aftercare because he's having so much fun. You need him to leave. So you have to get on the same page. So how can you find that win-win solution, which is a little surprise in the car? And so again, I'm not talking about anything big, or maybe it's that you wrote him a note and he's going to find the note in the car seat somewhere. Yes, it's effort on your part, 100%. But it sounds like it's a lot of effort to try and corral him on his scooter. Susan says, 10 and 12-year-old, how do you connect best to avoid yelling and consequences? That is a very broad question. To avoid yelling, I mean, the whole first section of my course is all about self-regulation, and we'll walk you through very specific steps to stop yelling. Not using consequences, definitely you have to be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Intentional about, you know, what kind of, as I said in this whole workshop, what support do the kids need to meet our expectations. This does work with 10 and 12-year-olds who have been raised so far with with conventional parenting, it just takes a little bit longer because you've got more old habits to break, and maybe they're not quite sure that you're going to stop yelling and stop using consequences. But I have to say, it's, you know, it's getting to that window where you really want to think about how are we going to go into the teen years, because kids who when you use yelling and consequences to get them to cooperate, what are they going to do when you can't control them, right? They're going to walk away from you. They're going to hide things. They're, you know, kids will lie to avoid consequences, or they'll sneak to avoid consequences. So it is very important to sort of get on, and I don't mean to be like, you know, saying it's dire, but it kind of is. I mean, like, you know, the teenagers that have close relationships with their parents, I was just reading this the other day, are less likely to be bullies and less likely to be bullied if they have a close relationship with their parents. They're less likely to use drugs and alcohol. And that, like, a close relationship with parents is so protective, and yelling and consequences is really going to get in the way of that close relationship. So office hours are, as I said, the whole schedule is on that page, sararosensweet.com/parenting course. Under the frequently asked questions, there's a list that shows the office hours. Currently, they rotate through the time zone. So they're on Wednesdays in Eastern time at either 9 a.m., noon, 2 p.m., or 5 p.m., rotating through the time zones. So if you have a question and you can't make office hours, I also have a Facebook group that's just for the group. I will answer every question in the private Facebook group. If you have a question and you can't make office hours, you can submit it ahead of time and I'll answer it, and then you can listen to the recording. So Jeff says, what do you do when you're trying peaceful parenting and you feel it's working, but other people and family are calling your kids bad, naughty, etc., and always calling your parenting soft? I'm sorry, Jeff. It is so hard when you are getting judged by other people. And I want you to remember that, and you say it is working. So it sounds like there's a gap between what your people around you are seeing as like as normal, as like what you're seeing as normal childhood behavior, that you're like working with your kids and you're, you know that they get tired and dysregulated and sometimes they don't do what you want them to do, but you feel that it is working. So your kids act out and push limits more than others because they're not afraid of you. That could be true. That could be true, that your kids are going to act out and push limits more because they're not afraid of you. And that's actually an okay thing. There was this great article in the New York Times called Why Your Rude Kids Might Not Be a Bad Thing, or something like that. And it was written by a science journalist who talked about when you've got kids who have good behavior because they're afraid of you, A, that's not lasting, and B, it leads to all sorts of authoritarian parenting leads to all sorts of bad mental health outcomes. I feel like we're gonna get cut off here in about 2 minutes. And Jeff, just know that it's a long game, and if I didn't answer your question, and Melissa, just check the yeah, you never did that at that age because they're afraid of you, because you're afraid of them. And having kids who are afraid of you, it does not mean that they're actually well behaved. It just means they're afraid. So we're looking for long-term good behavior, which is what they learn through habitual correcting and support and brain development. And they do the right thing because it's the right thing to do as they get older, because they want to be good and they want to cooperate, not because they're afraid of what's going to happen if they don't. Those are not linked to lasting good mental health outcomes or good behavior when they're older. And yeah, you never did that because you were afraid of doing that. But that doesn't mean that you actually had better self-regulation or that you actually had better impulse control. You just couldn't be yourself. There are some kids who are very good at home and then they act out at school because school is their safe place, right? And I'm not saying that you've got like that kids who are raised with peaceful parenting are naughty or bad behaved, but you do see a lot more letting it all hang out behavior sometimes. But then you also see them correcting themselves when you are giving them support and when they care what you think. So Melissa says, well, thank you so much, Melissa. I'm not going to read that because I think I'm about to get cut off, but I'll read it after. You are so welcome. And I hope that, oh, she started using declarative language. That's awesome. So I really hope that I see some of you in the course. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. If you didn't feel I answered your question well enough, feel free to leave it in the Facebook group. The big the big public one, and tag me, because I do want to make sure everyone's questions get answered. I'll keep talking until I get cut off because I've got